Hello, my name is Calvin Weir. It is May 21st. It is summer semester, and this is for criminal justice systems class. So today we're just looking at some data on the Bureau of Justice Statistics page, where they just, as you can see in the title, it's contacts between the police and the public. So we're just going to answer some questions from the document and just find the answers right in this form here. So the first question, it just simply asks, what percentage of the U.S. population over 16 had any contacts with police, and how does this compare to 2018? We can see right here in the first paragraph that 21% reported it in 2020, and that's down from 24% in 2018. So you can just see that crime dropped between those 2 years. Not that significant of an amount, but 2%, 3%, that's of tens of millions of cases. That is a pretty significant amount. Next is how are these contacts initiated, and we can see right here that there are two ways, again in the first paragraph, that there are police initiated contacts or there's resident initiated contacts. And I think pretty logically those are the only two ways that it can be initiated, so that makes sense. Just looking at the racial ethnic breakdown of contacts. We can see, one second, please. We can see right here that the racial ethnic breaks down to 22% white, 18% black, 16.5% Hispanic, 16% Asian, and 27.7% of any other race that's just not included in there. I don't think any of those numbers are very surprising. Looking at the number of these cases and also just comparing that to the demographics of the United States, you can see that there's there's proportionately a lot more white contacts, and I don't think that these numbers show that there's any bias or any other like wrongdoings by police, and I think that these are expected. Looking at gender, you can see that there again, it's very equal. There's about 300,000 more females that reported versus males. Again, I don't think any of that is alarming. Yes, there is obviously some more females that are reporting these contacts, but I don't think that is like out of the ordinary. The most common type of police contact is traffic accidents. Hold on, sorry. So we can see right here on this chart that of police-initiated contacts, that traffic stops are the most common form of stop. And again, I don't think that's any surprise. I feel like anyone who's been driving has been pulled over at least once. Whatever the reason is, a broken taillight or whatever. You're going to be stopped by a police officer at some point of your life. So I don't think that being the most common one is a surprise at all. Next, just looking at use of force. We can just scroll down to one of these charts here. Just give me 1 second to find it. Here we go. So this one just goes over the use of force, not fatal or non-fatal. Again, just about 2% involve that. You see that there is a much higher rate of males than females. Which again I think can be expected, but again, just along the race lines, there's really nothing out of the ordinary. One thing I just think is should be noted here is that force, I feel like it's a pretty wide definition. Yes, you want to involve the pepper spray, pointing of a gun, but also handcuffing is involved in this category. And with police work, handcuffs are just used so many times, whether it's just even just detaining someone while you're questioning them. It's just not unusual. So I think including it, yes, it's a use of force, but I think some people can misconstrue what that really means, and it just kind of blows it out of proportion. And that I would imagine that handcuffing is makes up a majority of these use of force like scenarios. Then just looking at what percent are say that they're likely to contact again. And, this is a good thing to talk about because you want people having good interactions with the police. And so on this right here, we can see that approximately 88% of people were satisfied, and that even 93% of people said that they were likely to contact police in the future. And, obviously this is what we, as a law enforcement officer, this is what you would want, because you want people feeling comfortable and safe with the police and saying that they'd be comfortable responding again. Now we're going to look at the percentages of residents' perception of police behavior. And so same here. You can see that 85% said that they responded promptly. I think this one is interesting that only 63% said that they improved the situation. But again, when you think about it more, a lot of these people just, when they're calling, there's never a situation where they would be satisfied. There's not there's not something that this police officer would do that would leave them satisfied. And so I don't think it's much of a shock that they didn't feel like they improved the situation. But still, regardless of them not being able to do that, they still behaved properly and they still were satisfied a large majority of the time. And then last, just my and again, just with gender and race, I don't think that there's really anything sticking out. It seems like it's pretty even across the board, where there's the big dip in improving the situation, but the overall behavior and response was taken with good, in good faith, in a good way. And then finally, just my overall conclusions of the data. I think this is really important data to show and to evaluate, because it shows, it just shows the raw numbers. But again, numbers can't show everything. They can't break down every single happening of every single one of these stops. And so that makes it difficult to apply these numbers like as a whole. But still, they're still important to, take. For example, the use of force table, where they said they marked down their perceived force as necessary or excessive, when the people being polled are the people who were I don't want to say victims, but were at the tail end of this force. I don't think it's a shock that a good point of these times that they deemed it as excessive. And so, while, these numbers are good, but I think that they should be taken with a grain of salt, and that, if any policy actions are being made or anything like that, that data should not be the only form of evaluation, and that that data should always be supplemented with other forms of data or other forms of evaluation.